I don't remember the exact day she stopped touching me. It doesn't happen like a movie scene where someone slams the door and yells that everything is over. No, when it's real life, it fades. Quietly, slowly, like a light dimming in a room you didn't notice was getting darker until you're sitting in complete silence. But I do remember the first time I asked her, really asked what was going on. We were in bed. Nothing dramatic. Just a Tuesday night. I reached over like I had 100 times before, placed my hand gently on her hip, leaned in to kiss her neck. She tensed immediately, like I'd startled her. "Hey," I whispered, trying to keep it light. "You okay?" She shifted away, pulling the blanket up like armor, and said it, the sentence that would echo for months in my mind. "I'm just not in the mood anymore." That word, anymore, it hit me hard. It wasn't tonight or right now. It was a soft wall, gently placed between us, final and cold. I laid back, stared at the ceiling for a long time, and said nothing. We'd been married for years by then. You'd think a sentence like that would spark an argument. But it didn't. I wasn't mad. I was confused. Hurt, yeah. But more than that, I was wondering when it had started. Because when you're with someone that long, the little moments begin to blend together. I started replaying things in my head. Her going to bed earlier than usual. Me reaching for her hand on the couch, and her pulling it back to scroll on her phone. The fact that she hadn't kissed me, really kissed me, in over a month. But somehow I hadn't noticed. Or maybe I had, and I didn't want to admit it. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd been working too much. Maybe I'd let myself go. I wasn't hitting the gym as often. I'd gained a few pounds. Maybe I hadn't been as romantic as I used to be. I thought, maybe if I just do more, help more, cook dinner, bring flowers, plan a weekend away, she'll come back. So I tried. God, I tried. I made breakfast on Sundays. Cleaned the garage. Booked a weekend trip to the coast just for the two of us. She smiled, thanked me, even posted about it on Instagram. But back in the hotel room, she lay with her back to me, claimed her head hurt, rolled over, and fell asleep before I'd even brushed my teeth. I remember brushing my teeth in silence, staring into the mirror, asking myself, what the hell is happening to my marriage? But I didn't talk about it. Not with friends. Not with family. I didn't even fully talk to her about it. Because as a man, you're trained not to bring that kind of thing up. If you say you're not getting affection at home, people think you're whining. If you tell another man, he shrugs it off like, yeah, women, right? Or worse, they laugh and tell you to just go get it somewhere else. But I wasn't interested in getting it somewhere else. I just wanted my wife back. The distance between us kept growing. Not in big, dramatic arguments, in the absence of anything at all. The kind of silence that wears you down over time. We'd eat dinner, talk about her job, the weather, what show we were watching. But the intimacy, the warmth, the closeness, it was gone. And I wasn't stupid. I knew what it meant. A woman doesn't just stop wanting affection for no reason. And when she does, but keeps taking from you, emotionally, financially, physically, something is off. There was a moment, a few weeks after that first night, when I got home from work and saw her sitting on the couch, laughing while scrolling through her phone. It was the first time I'd seen her genuinely happy in weeks. I asked, what's so funny? She said, oh, nothing. Just some reels. Stupid stuff. She smiled, but not at me. She hadn't smiled at me like that in a long time. That night, I watched her from across the dinner table as she talked about needing a new jacket and how her favorite store had this big sale. She dropped the catalog in front of me, circled something, and said, can you grab this for me in the next paycheck? It's kind of pricey, but worth it. And that's when it really hit me. She wanted the dinner. She wanted the clothes. She wanted the lifestyle, the comfort, the safety. But not me. I was just part of the furniture now. The provider. The ATM. That night, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling again. Her back was turned, as usual. I didn't reach for her. I didn't say goodnight. I just stared and thought, this can't be it. This can't be what marriage turns into. And yet I stayed. For weeks I stayed, trying to fix it, trying to understand, trying to believe it was temporary. But it wasn't. One morning I tried again. I brought her coffee, told her she looked beautiful, even though I hadn't been allowed to touch her in weeks. She smiled, took the mug, and said thanks. Nothing more. No kiss. No eye contact. She scrolled through her phone, while sipping the coffee I made for her. That same day, she sent me a message at work asking if I could send her $300 for a spa weekend with her girlfriends. That was the moment I felt something snap inside me. Not anger, not rage, just clarity. She had refused to be a wife, in every emotional and physical sense of the word. But she still wanted the benefits. She still wanted me to carry all the weight. It was the day I realized something crucial. I can love someone and still say no. I didn't answer her message right away. I took the rest of the day to think. And that evening, when I walked into the house, something had changed in me. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't even bring it up. But I looked at her differently. I saw the woman in front of me for who she had become, not who she used to be, not who I hoped she'd turn into again, but for what she really was now. Someone who took, who dismissed, who withheld, and who had started believing I'd never do anything about it. She was wrong. I used to think providing meant something. That if I showed up every day, paid the bills on time, made sure the fridge was full, the mortgage was covered, and the light stayed on, then somehow I'd earned love. Or at least, earned respect. But turns out, money doesn't buy affection. It just hides the silence a little longer. From the outside, we look fine. People at church would see us walking in together and say, "You two are such a great couple." My friends at work would joke, "You're lucky, man. She's pretty, quiet, not causing drama. Keep that one." And I used to nod and smile, pretending they were right. But they never saw the inside of our house. Not really. They didn't see me sitting at the table every night eating dinner alone because she wasn't hungry or already ate something earlier. They didn't see the couch where we used to sit close. Now, with a throw pillow always between us like a boundary marker neither one of us crossed anymore. And they sure as hell didn't see our bedroom, where I slept beside a woman who hadn't kissed me in months, let alone touched me. I was the one covering everything. Rent? That was me. Utilities? All on my card. Groceries, gas, insurance, the car she drove, the streaming services, her phone plan, the house cleaning app she liked, the Amazon packages that arrived every week. All me. She hadn't chipped in financially in over 2 years. At first, it was because her job was cut. Then, it was, I want to focus on something I actually enjoy. Then she said she was working on content creation, whatever that meant. To be fair, in the beginning, I didn't mind. I told her, "Don't worry. I've got us." And I meant it. I'd rather shoulder the weight than watch her struggle. But slowly I realized I was shouldering the weight alone in every sense. Not just money. Emotionally, too. There was a time she used to leave notes in my lunchbox. Stupid little things like, "Hope today's better than yesterday," or "Miss your face." I used to keep them folded in my glove box. But those stopped without a word. She used to greet me at the door when I came home, even if it was just in pajamas, hair tied up. Just a hug, a look, a warm presence. That disappeared too. I couldn't remember the last time she'd asked me how my day went and waited for an answer. She used to run her fingers through my hair while I talked. Now, she'd scroll through her phone while nodding half-heartedly, not even hearing me. The turning point for me wasn't dramatic. It was small, like most of these moments are. We had a dinner reservation I booked 2 weeks in advance. Nice place downtown. Nothing crazy, but not cheap either. She wore a decent dress, but didn't seem excited. Didn't ask where we were going. Didn't compliment me. Nothing. And the moment we sat down, she pulled out her phone and stayed on it. We ordered. She barely looked at the menu, just pointed to something. I tried to start a conversation. I asked her about her week, about a show she'd mentioned, about a friend of hers I knew she was worried about. She answered in short phrases, one eye on her phone, nodding, smiling at something that had nothing to do with me. At some point, I stopped talking altogether, just to see how long it would take for her to notice. She didn't. I finished my drink in silence, looked around at other couples, some laughing, some talking over candlelight, some bickering, even, but at least they were engaging. Me? I was dining with a ghost. When we got home, she said, "I'm tired," and disappeared into the bathroom. I sat in the kitchen staring at the receipt from dinner, $138.64. For food she barely touched. For silence I didn't deserve. And that night, like every other night for the past year, she rolled to her side of the bed, pulled the covers around herself like a barrier, and fell asleep. I lay awake, watching the ceiling fan spin, feeling like a stranger in my own life. How we get here? I thought back to the early days when we couldn't keep our hands off each other, when we'd kiss in the kitchen, laugh under the blankets, shower together just to be close. Now, she flinched when my hand brushed hers. Now, she wore oversized shirts to bed every night. Not once had she reached for me in months. And yet, every month, I paid her way. She got her hair done. She ordered skincare boxes. She bought little things online just because. I paid every cent. And you know what? I could have handled the bills. I've never complained about being the provider. That's who I am. But what I couldn't accept, what started to boil inside me, was that I was paying for a connection that no longer existed. She wanted the comfort of a relationship, the security of a shared house, the convenience of a husband, but none of the responsibilities. Not emotional, not physical, not even basic respect. We were roommates. No, worse than that. We were roommates where only one person worked and the other made all the rules. You ever try to talk to someone who's already made up their mind to not care? That's what it felt like every time I brought it up. She always had an excuse. I'm just going through something right now. You wouldn't understand. I've been tired lately. It's not about you. But if it's not about me, then why am I paying for it? Why am I the one sacrificing, showing up, investing, while she contributes nothing but withdrawal? That's when it hit me. This wasn't a relationship anymore. It was a one-sided contract, one I never agreed to sign. I had become invisible in my own home, valued only for what I could provide, ignored when I needed something back. And that's when I started to shift. I didn't announce anything. I didn't start a fight. I didn't make threats. But I began to change the rules. Because if I was going to sleep alone every night, she was going to pay her own way. There's a special kind of silence that comes after rejection. Not the loud, dramatic kind. I'm talking sobria quil silencio constrangeder, onde ninguém fala, mas tudo mundo sente. That was our bedroom, almost every night. I'd reach out gently, a hand on her waist, a kiss on the back of her neck. Nothing forceful, just a gesture, a signal that I still craved connection, that I still loved her. She'd stiffen instantly, like I was a stranger invading her space. Sometimes she'd shift under the blanket like she didn't even feel it. Outras vezes, ela dizia, "Babe, I'm just too tired. Not tonight, I got a headache. I need to be up early tomorrow." And I'd nod, every single time. Not because I believed it, but because I didn't want to turn into something worse. Because I still respected her boundaries, even though mine were being ignored. But you can only be gentle for so long before you start to feel invisible. It didn't matter how patient I was, how kind, how considerate. She kept turning away. But funny thing, she never turned away when she wanted something. There was this weekend, not long after another night of her dodging affection, when she came into the kitchen wearing that light tone she used when she wanted to sound sweet. "Hey, babe," she said, casually flipping through her phone. "Me and the girls are planning a spa day next Saturday. There's this package at that new place on 3rd. It's like facials, massage, everything. Only $280. I was pouring coffee. She didn't even look up. She just kept scrolling and added, "Can I use your card? Just for the deposit. I'll book it online now." I looked at her for a few seconds, trying to figure out what emotion I was feeling. Sadness? Frustration? Or just plain emptiness? Because the night before, I'd reached for her in bed and she literally flinched. Not in fear, in disgust. Like she couldn't stand the thought of me wanting her. And now, 12 hours later, she wanted my credit card. I didn't say no. Not that time. I just handed it to her and watched her face light up. That was the first time I noticed something. She only smiled when she was receiving something. When it came to affection, blank face. But if it was about gifts, dinner, new shoes, a girls' night, or spa sessions, she'd light up like Times Square. It started to eat at me. I paid attention. I watched. I studied. And the pattern became clearer every day. Whenever we had tension, even when it was unspoken, she'd treat herself. Whenever I tried to initiate intimacy and was met with coldness, a day or two later, she'd suggest something that involved me spending. Brunch with friends, shopping with her sister, online orders, always framed as little things. "Can I just borrow your card real quick?" Or, "Hey, I need to grab something small. Is that okay?" Every time I tried to touch her, even emotionally, I got nothing. But she kept her hand out for more. There was this other time I'll never forget. I came home early from work, canceled a meeting, wanted to surprise her, maybe do something together. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch in leggings and a hoodie, binge-watching some reality show. I walked over, leaned down, kissed her cheek, and said, "Hey, thought we could grab dinner, just us." She didn't even pause the show. "I'm not really in the mood to go out. I'm bloated, honestly. Can we just chill?" I nodded, stepped back, and went to change. I felt like a fool. That same night, I kid you not, she texted me from the bedroom, in the same house, asking if I could sell her $90. "Group dinner tomorrow night. I'm covering Stacy's birthday. Can I use your card?" And I realized she didn't need space. She didn't need rest. She just didn't want me. But she wanted the lifestyle I gave her. It reached a boiling point one Saturday morning. I made pancakes, set the table, thought maybe, just maybe, we could have a good start to the day. She walked in, barely acknowledged the effort, and sat down scrolling through her phone. I served her plate. She didn't look up. I sat across from her and said, "Do you ever miss how we used to be?" She blinked, then sighed. "Not this again. All I'm asking," I said gently, "is if you ever miss being close." She dropped her fork, leaned back, arms crossed. "You act like I'm some kind of machine that's supposed to perform on command. I'm tired. I've been stressed. You never understand what I go through." I kept my mouth shut. She wasn't working. She wasn't caring for a child. She wasn't managing a household. I was doing all the heavy lifting, financially, emotionally, practically. But when I asked for connection, I was accused of being selfish. That's the moment I felt something shift inside me. She wasn't just withholding affection. She was manipulating the narrative, painting herself as the victim and me as the aggressor, simply because I missed being touched by the woman I married. I stopped talking, and she went right back to eating. An hour later, I walked past her in the hallway. She stopped me, smiled sweetly, and said, "Oh, I almost forgot. I need a new pair of boots. For the winter. Can we swing by that place downtown tomorrow? They're doing a buy one, get one." And I saw a pair I really liked. I looked at her face. Warm, playful, alive. Not once had I seen that expression when I told her I miss you. But here it was full color when money was involved. That night, I stayed up alone in the kitchen. No lights, just me, my old notebook, and a pen. And I made a list. I started with every payment I'd made in the last 3 months. Groceries, gas, beauty appointments, shoes, dresses, phone bills, streaming, Uber rides she took to dinners with friends, spa packages, her monthly lash tech, skincare kits, subscriptions she never canceled. Then I flipped the page, and I wrote, things I've gotten in return. There was no list, just one word, nothing. That's when I decided, if she wasn't willing to be a wife, I wasn't going to keep paying for her lifestyle. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to get revenge. But I finally saw the truth. She pulled away when I needed her most. But her hand was always out when it was time to spend. And that was the last time she got anything from me without earning it first. There's a strange kind of pain that comes when someone flips the script on you, when they paint you as the villain in a story where all you ever tried to do was love. I wasn't perfect, but I was present. I never yelled, never once raised my voice in that house, never broke a plate, slammed a door, or threatened to leave. I didn't guilt trip her. I didn't throw money in her face. I didn't say things just to hurt. All I ever did was ask. I asked for connection. I asked for time. I asked for closeness, the kind married people are supposed to share. But over time, that simple act, asking to be touched, to be seen, turned into something she used against me. She started calling it pressure, said I was too demanding, that I didn't understand what she was going through, that I was always needing something. At first, I tried to explain myself. I told her I wasn't trying to make her uncomfortable. I just missed her. I missed us. I told her I'd wait, that I understood she was going through something and that I wasn't going anywhere. And I meant it, but it didn't matter. The more I stayed calm, the more I was accused of being emotionally manipulative, like my patience was some kind of weapon. She said I was creating an environment of pressure. Imagine hearing that. After months of sleeping in a cold bed, after being ignored at the dinner table, after doing everything to keep the house standing while she sat in silence. I was told I was making her feel unsafe because I wanted my wife to hold me. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just went quiet. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Silence, when it comes from a man, is often mistaken for guilt. She'd walk around like she was the one being wounded, posting things like, "Protect your peace," or "You don't owe anyone access to your body." Friends would comment, "You're so strong." And I'd sit there, scrolling, knowing they didn't know the half of it. I wasn't asking for access. I was asking for honesty. Was it me? Was there someone else? Had she just fallen out of love and didn't know how to say it? I didn't need sex. I needed truth. But instead, I got blamed for being patient, for staying kind, for not giving up. So I did the only thing I could do. I started writing. Late at night, I'd sit on the edge of the bed while she scrolled through her phone or turned her back to me, and I'd jot things down in a cheap black notebook I bought at the drugstore. Not out of spite, not to build a case, but to survive. I needed a space to put the things I couldn't say out loud. Tonight, I tried to hold her hand. She pulled away. Again, she laughed on the phone with a friend today. I miss hearing that laugh in my direction. I bought groceries, filled her gas tank, and covered the credit card bill. She didn't say thank you. It wasn't a list of complaints. It was a record of vanishing. Each entry was a quiet confirmation of what I already knew. I was disappearing from my own marriage. Still, I didn't walk away. Instead, I watched. I began to see patterns. Her mood lifted whenever she ordered something online. She'd get chatty if she needed help with an errand. She'd dress up only when she was going out with someone else. When it came to me, she was exhausted, blank, cold. She wasn't tired. She was selective. I also started noticing her language, how she positioned herself. She talked to her sister on speaker while cooking, making comments like, "I don't know what's wrong with him lately. He's just distant." Or, "He doesn't really respect my boundaries. Always wants to talk or touch." And once, to her friend on FaceTime, she said it flat out. "He's not abusive or anything, but it's emotionally exhausting having to deal with his needs all the time." I sat in the hallway that day, out of sight, and felt something in me collapse. She wasn't just disconnecting from me. She was rewriting who I was, turning me into some needy man who couldn't take a hint, when in reality, I was the one keeping everything together. Emotionally, financially, even spiritually. I stopped trying to explain myself. There was no point anymore. No matter how gentle I was, how sincere, she would twist it. So I felt quiet. Not bitter, not cruel, just quiet. But quiet men aren't harmless. We're just calculating. And that's when I started a plan. I didn't have a detailed roadmap yet. I wasn't thinking revenge. But I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep giving, loving, waiting, and be painted as the aggressor for wanting what I'd already earned. I started pulling back. Emotionally, mentally, financially. I canceled the date nights I used to schedule. Stopped offering to fix things around the house before she even asked. When the credit card bill came in, I didn't pay it right away. When she needed something transferred to her account, I took a few days to reply. I watched how she reacted, not to my love, not to my presence, but to the disruption in her routine. She noticed when I stopped paying, not when I stopped trying. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about love. It was about control. And once she realized the control was slipping, that her narrative wasn't working anymore, she got scared. But it was too late, because I had already seen the truth. She said I was pressuring her, but the only pressure I ever applied was silence. I didn't plan to sleep on the couch that night. It wasn't some grand gesture. No dramatic exit, no slamming of doors, no boiling argument that pushed me over the edge. It just happened. We were in the bedroom. She was already under the covers, scrolling through her phone with the brightness dimmed, headphones in. I said goodnight, like I always did. She didn't respond. Maybe she didn't hear me. Maybe she chose not to. I brushed my teeth in silence. Changed into the same clothes I always wore to bed. Sat on the edge of the mattress for a moment, watching her silhouette lit faintly by the screen in her hand. No glance in my direction. No eye contact. No warmth. There was something about that moment, about how ordinary and cold it felt, that made me stand up and leave. I grabbed my pillow, walked out, and went downstairs. The couch was cold, a little lumpy. The throw blanket wasn't enough, but I didn't care. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the hum of the fridge in the background, the occasional tick of the wall clock filling the room like a heartbeat that didn't belong to anyone. I wasn't upset. Not anymore. I didn't cry. Didn't rage. I just lay there, hands folded over my chest, and let the realization settle in. She's gone. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. She left a long time ago. I was just the last one to admit it. And that's the part nobody talks about. When your partner checks out of the relationship, they don't always leave. They stay, but they stop showing up. They stop seeing you. And you keep trying, fixing leaks, carrying groceries, asking how their day went, thinking that maybe, just maybe, they'll come back. But they don't. They just get comfortable letting you do the work. That night, lying there on a couch I didn't belong to, in a house I paid for, in a life that had started to feel like a trap, I realized something brutal. She wouldn't even notice I was gone. And I was right. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of her footsteps upstairs. Cabinets opening. Coffee brewing. The usual sounds of her morning routine. No pause in the rhythm. No. Where were you? No mention of the fact that I hadn't slept beside her for the first time in years. I walked into the kitchen. She was there in her robe, pouring creamer into her mug. She glanced up, offered a half smile, and said, "Morning." That was it. No curiosity. No concern. Not even a follow-up. I nodded back and poured my own cup, hand steady, heart quiet. It was over. Not the marriage on paper. Not yet, but the illusion that there was something left to fight for. And in that moment, I wasn't broken. I was clear. It's strange how clarity doesn't always come like a lightning bolt. Sometimes, it arrives in the form of complete silence. When you finally realize the absence of care is louder than any fight could ever be. She wasn't mad at me. She wasn't avoiding me because of some unresolved conflict. She just didn't care, and I couldn't pretend anymore. We were two strangers playing house. I paid the bills. She used the resources. I offered love. She tolerated my presence. I needed connection. She needed convenience. After breakfast, she said something about meeting a friend for brunch. Asked if I could transfer her just $60 for the place they were going. And without missing a beat, I said, no. She blinked. What? I'm not covering that. I said, plain and calm. Not anymore. Her mouth opened slightly, like she couldn't process the word. It's just brunch, David. I took a sip of coffee, and I just slept on the couch. You didn't even ask why. Her expression shifted, annoyance creeping in. Oh my God, are we going to do this again? I shook my head slowly. No, we're done. She stared at me, confused. Not by the words, but by the tone. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even sarcastic. I was just done. Done being used. Done trying to earn the affection of someone who decided months ago that I no longer mattered. That day, I left the house before she returned. Drove around for hours. I didn't go anywhere specific. Just moved. I needed space. I needed to breathe without her shadow in the room. And the whole time, I thought about the shift that happened the night before. How one decision, one simple moment of walking away from a cold bed could open my eyes that wide. That couch, uncomfortable and narrow, had given me more peace than our bedroom ever could. Because I chose it. And when I did, I realized I was still capable of choosing something for myself. It wasn't about punishment. It wasn't a mind game. It was self-respect. And in the days that followed, I kept sleeping there. On purpose. Not to send a message. Not to guilt trip her. Just because it was the only place in that house that didn't lie to me. And still, she never said a word. She didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't try to pull me back into our bed. Didn't offer an explanation, an apology, or even a joke to break the tension. She just let me go. And that was all the confirmation I needed. People don't lose each other in fights. They lose each other in silence. And once you realize someone is more bothered by a missed deposit than your absence in bed, you stop negotiating. You start preparing. And I did. Quietly. Because now I knew. This wasn't a rough patch. This was the end. There comes a point when a man stops asking for respect and starts reclaiming it. Mine came early one morning, 2 days after I started sleeping on the couch. I woke up before the sun, like I always do. The house was still. No footsteps, no coffee brewing, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and my own heartbeat. I sat at the dining table, alone, phone in hand. There was no anger in me, just clarity. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't breathing hard. I wasn't second-guessing anything. I opened the banking app. 2 years of expenses, all tracked under my name. She didn't contribute a dime. Not to the mortgage, not to the utilities, not even to groceries. Everything she used, everything she wore, every dinner she posted on Instagram, all that was paid for by me. And in return, I've been met with cold shoulders, eye rolls, and excuses. She'd made it clear she was no longer my partner, so I stopped treating her like one. The first thing I did was freeze our joint account. Not close it, not yet. Just put it on hold. One click. Next, I logged into the credit card portal and revoked her authorized user status. Gone. Then came the streaming services. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, all tied to my card. I canceled them. Not out of pettiness, just logic. Why should I continue funding a lifestyle for someone who didn't even acknowledge I was in the room? The last thing I did was something small but symbolic. I logged into our insurance provider and removed her car from my plan. She'd have to pay her own premium now. I sat back and stared at the screen. Done. No text. No warning. No announcement. Just action. I got up, made my own coffee, sat in silence and waited. She came downstairs around 9:30. Hair messy, robe tied lazily around her waist. She looked half asleep, face lit up by her phone screen as she scrolled through whatever feed was feeding her that morning. Hey, she muttered, not even looking at me. I sipped my coffee and gave her a nod. Nothing else. 2 minutes later, I heard it. Wait, what the hell? Her voice rose. I stayed quiet. She tapped the screen again, harder this time. My card isn't working. I didn't look up. She walked toward the table, eyes wide. David, did you cancel the account? I finally met her gaze. No, I said calmly. I froze it. Her mouth opened, stunned. Why? I took another sip. Asked me again why I'd been sleeping on the couch. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Her face tightened. She crossed her arms. So this is how it is now? You just want to cut me off. I set my cup down. I've been cut off for months. You just didn't see it because you weren't the one bleeding. She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was. And maybe she didn't. Maybe for the first time, she was seeing the man she thought would stay silent forever. Choose something other than submission. She shook her head, half laughing. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being fair. She turned on her heel and marched back upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. But it didn't rattle me. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't shaken. I was free. Later that day, I got the first call. She was trying to buy something online, I don't know what, and the payment failed. She left me a voicemail, voice sugary sweet. Hey babe, something's up with the card. Think you could take a look? Love you. I didn't call back. Then came the texts. Can you unfreeze it just for today? I'm late for my hair appointment. Seriously? What is your problem? We live together. I'm not your enemy. I read them all. Replied to none. That evening, she stormed into the living room while I watched the news. Are you really going to ignore me now? I muted the TV and looked at her. I'm done funding disrespect. She scoffed. So now affection has a price tag? No, I replied. But my silence used to be free. Now it's going to cost something. That hit her. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. She started pacing. I can't believe you're doing this. You know I have things booked. I have plans. I had plans too, I said. They involved a marriage, intimacy, partnership, but you changed them without telling me. Now I'm adjusting accordingly. She was stunned, not because the words were loud, but because they were measured. Calm hits harder than rage. And I was calm. For the next few days, I watched her unravel. The little luxuries she was used to vanished. She had to reschedule her lash appointment. She tried to rent a movie, error message. She needed gas. I saw her call a friend for help. The panic set in fast. Not because she didn't have resources, but because she didn't know how to survive without me covering the cracks. For the first time, she had to face the consequences of treating me like an afterthought while enjoying the lifestyle I provided. And I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I didn't even remind her of what she'd done. I just kept showing up for myself, cooking my own meals, paying my own way, and letting her see what it looked like when a man finally stands up, not by shouting, but by stepping back. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration, and she felt it. Because for the first time since the intimacy stopped, since the affection died, since the love turned cold, the power had shifted. I wasn't begging anymore. I wasn't explaining. I wasn't financing her comfort at the cost of my own soul. I was done. And nothing unsettles a woman who's used to control, like a man who simply walks away without needing to raise his voice. It didn't take long for silence to turn into accusation. 1 week after I froze the joint account and removed her from the credit card, she snapped. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I had just gotten home from work. The house was quiet, but tense. The kind of tension that doesn't come from fighting, but from everything that's been left unsaid for too long. She was in the kitchen, pacing with her phone in hand, clearly agitated. The moment she saw me, her expression hardened. "You're seriously still doing this?" she said, arms crossed like she was preparing for battle. I couldn't pay for my appointment today. I was humiliated. I set my keys down and walked into the room calm. "Steady. I told you I wasn't going to keep covering everything." She threw her hands up. "That's financial abuse, David. You can't just cut me off and expect me to be okay." I didn't respond right away. I looked at her, really looked, not at the woman I married, but at the version standing in front of me now. The one who hadn't touched me in months, who hadn't asked how I was doing, who acted like intimacy was optional, but financial support was a permanent entitlement. Abuse. I said slowly, "Is that what we're calling it now?" "Yes," she shot back. "You've created a hostile environment. You're controlling me with money." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how backwards it was. Controlling her? She hadn't let me near her emotionally or physically in almost a year. She dictated the tone of every room, decided when we talked, what we talked about, and whether I was allowed to express how I felt without being called needy or manipulative. But now that the bank stopped approving her lifestyle, now I was the abuser? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just walked over to the drawer where I kept my paperwork, pulled out a folder I'd been building quietly for months, maybe even longer, subconsciously. Bank statements, transaction logs, PayPal screenshots, Venmo transfers, credit card breakdowns. Everything was categorized, color-coded. I laid it all on the table. "Sit," I said. She hesitated. "Sit," I repeated, flat but firm. She pulled out a chair, reluctantly. I sat across from her and slid the first sheet forward. "This is the electric bill for the last 14 months. Paid every single one. Next, the water bill. You see your name anywhere on this?" "No." "Thought so. Internet, mortgage, gas, phone, subscriptions, car maintenance, health insurance. Every single item, paid in full. By me." I flipped page after page, reading off dates and amounts while she sat there, mouth slightly open, watching her version of reality disintegrate. "This one," I said, holding up a printout of a spa transaction. "That massage you got in January, $245. You posted about it. Caption said self-care day. You didn't mention I paid for it." I pulled another sheet. "This dress, the one you wore to your sister's birthday dinner? You said you bought it with your own money. But here's the bank alert from my card." Then I leaned forward. "Do you want to talk about control now?" She looked away, her lips pressed tightly together. I could see her brain working, not to process guilt, but to find a way out. A new angle, a fresh defense. So I gave her none. "I gave you everything," I continued, still calm. "Not just money. I gave you grace when you rejected me night after night. I gave you patience when you rolled your eyes every time I asked for connection. I gave you love when you gave me distance." I paused, let the silence settle between us like dust in sunlight. "I begged for us to work. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't cheat. I just kept showing up until I realized you weren't going to." She blinked rapidly. Then tears, but not the kind that come from remorse. These were panic tears, not sadness, but the fear of losing grip. She started, voice trembling. "I've been stressed. I haven't been myself. You know that." I nodded. "I do. That's why I waited. For months." She sniffled, wiping at her eyes. "So you're done now? Just like that?" "No," I said. "You were done. I just finally accepted it." She covered her face, leaned forward on the table. I didn't move. There was a time when I would have walked over, rubbed her back, told her we'd figure it out. There was a time when her tears were enough to reset everything. But that time was long gone. Because this wasn't about one bad week. This was about the pattern. This was about the woman who let me sleep in another room and never once asked why. Who told others I was emotionally needy for craving intimacy in a marriage. Who accepted gift after gift but treated affection like a transaction I hadn't earned. Now, with her narrative collapsing around her, she cried, not for what she did, but because she couldn't control the outcome anymore. "You could have just talked to me," she whispered. "I did," I replied. "Not like this." I gestured to the folder. "This was the only way left to talk to you, with facts. Because feelings never moved you. But maybe numbers will." She looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks. "What do you want from me?" That's when I stood. I looked her dead in the eyes. Accountability. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder, and left her at the table, shoulders slumped, head down. That night, I slept on the couch again. But for the first time, I didn't feel displaced. I felt powerful, because I finally understood silence isn't weakness. It's preparation. And I was done being her wallet, her fallback, her emotional punching bag. From now on, she'd deal with reality. Not the version she told people, but the one where the man she ignored stopped letting her live like nothing happened. I didn't leave in anger. There was no shouting, no broken dishes, no dramatic speech at the door. Just one morning, a quiet Thursday, when I packed the essentials, got in my car, and drove away. No note, no goodbye, only silence. I had made up my mind a week earlier. After months of sleeping alone, being ignored, watching her cry not from remorse, but from the fear of losing her lifestyle, I realized I didn't know her closure. She closed the door on this marriage long before I ever reached for the handle. So I woke up early, before the sun broke through the blinds, and moved like a ghost through the house. I took only what was mine: clothes, my laptop, a couple books, and a framed photo of my late father that she never even liked. The rest I left behind. The mortgage was still in my name. The utilities, the car insurance, the credit lines, all connected to me. But emotionally, I had disconnected everything. That was the real shift. The day I left, I wasn't bitter. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't even tired anymore. I was clear. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment across town. Nothing fancy. Just clean, quiet and mine. The first night I slept there, I laid on the mattress on the floor, no bed frame yet, no TV hooked up, and felt more at peace than I had in years. No tension in the air. No weight on my chest. No pretending. Meanwhile, back at the house, she woke up to an empty bed. My drawers half empty. Closet rearranged. Bathroom counter missing my toothbrush, razor, cologne. I imagined she stood there, waiting for the anger to rise. Waiting to feel wronged. But she wasn't abandoned. She was finally left to face the life she'd built, without the man she thought would never leave. I didn't block her number. I didn't need to, because I knew she'd reach out eventually. And when she did, I'd be ready. The first text came at noon. "Where are you?" I didn't answer. That evening, another. "You can't just leave like this. We need to talk." No, we didn't. The call started the next day. First from her, then from her sister, then from a mutual friend she hadn't spoken to in months. I ignored everyone, because the version of me they wanted to speak to, the man who tolerated everything quietly, didn't exist anymore. By day 3, the tone shifted. "The internet's down. I can't work like this. There's no money in the account. The mortgage is due. You're being immature." That last one made me laugh. I was immature for finally leaving? For removing myself from a relationship where I was used but never valued? The truth was, she wasn't angry that I was gone. She was terrified that I wasn't coming back. Because for the first time in years, she had to face life without backup. She had to make the payments, cook her own meals, figure out how to keep the lights on, and, maybe most of all, explain to people why her husband left and never looked back. That kind of silence exposes people. It forces them to confront the truth they've been spinning. She couldn't blame me, couldn't accuse me of cheating or abuse, couldn't say I was unstable. Because the facts were clear, I paid for everything. I asked for connection. I gave time, patience, effort, and I left only after being denied all of it. She didn't lose me. She pushed me away and didn't expect I'd have the strength to stay gone. But I did. And the more distance I put between us, the more I started to breathe again. I'd wake up in a new place and make breakfast. Not because someone was watching, but because I wanted to. I started running again, reading, sleeping through the night without tension in the room. And best of all, no more pretending. No more walking on eggshells. No more initiating conversations only to be met with eye rolls. No more trying to earn affection I should have received freely. Meanwhile, she began to unravel. Friends who used to envy her relationship started asking questions. The curated image of our marriage, the posts, the dinners, the vacations, couldn't explain the sudden silence. She stopped posting altogether, because without me, there was no image left to maintain. I later heard, through a mutual acquaintance, that she'd asked her mother for help with a mortgage, that her card got declined trying to book a hotel for a weekend trip she had planned before I left, that she missed a few payments on her car insurance and had to call and plead for an extension. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. That was never the goal. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted to stop being hurt. The irony? She could have kept everything. All she had to do was show up, emotionally, physically, mentally. All she had to do was be a partner. But she chose comfort over connection, chose silence over effort, chose herself, not in a healthy, independent way, but in a selfish, entitled one. And when I took myself out of the equation, she realized that the life she enjoyed wasn't built by her. It was built by me, quietly, faithfully, day after day. Now, she was on her own, and I was finally free. It took her 33 days to reach out. Not that I was counting, but I remember the number because it was the first full month I'd felt peace in a long time. Life had become simple again. Quiet mornings with coffee I made for myself. Evenings spent reading instead of arguing in silence. Food tasted better. Music sounded like something again. The noise in my head, the confusion, the guilt, the frustration, had finally gone still. I wasn't happy yet, but I was steady. And after what I'd been through, that was more than enough. Then the messages started. The first came in just after midnight. I was asleep, phone on silent, but when I woke up the next morning, I saw the name glowing on the screen. Brooke, the same name that used to make my chest tighten, now felt foreign. Empty. I miss us. That's all it said. 3 words. No punctuation. No context. I read it twice. Put the phone down. Went back to pouring my coffee. A few hours later, another. Please don't ignore me. I just need to talk. By the end of the day, she'd sent 7 texts. I know I made mistakes. I didn't realize how good I had it. I've been thinking about everything. Can we talk just once? I didn't respond. It wasn't out of spite. It was because I'd already had that conversation 100 times in my head when I was still in the house, waiting for her to see me. When I was paying bills while being treated like a burden. When I was sleeping on the couch, wondering how I'd become invisible to the person I once held closest. Now, her words were just echoes. Too late to be meaningful. Too familiar to be convincing. That week, she kept reaching out. Voice messages, long ones, full of trembling breaths and slow, tearful confessions. I didn't handle things right. I thought you'd always be there. You were the only person who ever loved me, without conditions. She cried on tape. I could hear in her throat. The panic, the regret, the unraveling of someone who'd spent so long with the upper hand. She never imagined what it would feel like to hold nothing. And still, I didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. What could I tell her? That I finally slept through the night? That I no longer second-guess my worth? That I met someone kind, present, whole? Her name was Alyssa. We met through a mutual friend about 2 weeks after I moved out. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't fast. Just coffee at first, then a walk in the park, then dinner. Not romantic, just real. She asked questions and actually waited for the answers. She laughed at things that weren't forced. She touched my arm when I spoke, not in seduction, but connection. There was no tension, no eggshells, no performance. With her, I didn't feel like I was trying to prove anything. I was just me, and that was enough. She didn't know the whole story, not yet, but she knew enough to be gentle, and she never once asked about the past. She just stayed present. That alone said more than Brooke ever did in the last year of our marriage. One night, while I was cooking dinner, My phone rang again. Brooke's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Then silence. A few seconds later, Alyssa walked in from the porch, her face calm, her voice soft. "Someone's calling again," she said, handing me the phone. Didn't mean to pick it up, but it answered on the first tap. She passed it to me, but didn't look through the messages, didn't ask questions. She just handed it over. I lifted it to my ear. On the other end, Brooke's voice cracked through. "David? Hello." I didn't say anything. A beat passed. "David, are you there?" Then I spoke. "She's not here right now." Silence. Then a pause. "Who is this?" "She's not here." I repeated gently. "You'll have to try again some other time." And then I ended the call. I stood there for a moment, phone in hand, staring out the kitchen window. Alyssa stood beside me, waiting quietly, not needing an explanation. I turned to her, smiled. She smiled back, like she already knew what had just happened. And just like that, it was done. Brooke never called again. Maybe she realized she'd finally lost the one person who stood by her when no one else would. Maybe she finally felt what it was like to be left behind, not out of pettiness, but self-respect. And maybe, just maybe, she understood that love isn't guaranteed. It has to be fed, nurtured, held gently. And when you let it starve long enough, it dies. I didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction in her pain, no joy in watching her fall apart, only relief. Because I gave everything. Patience, loyalty, silence. I stayed longer than I should have, held on when it hurt, hoped when there was no reason left to believe in anything. And in the end, I walked away with nothing in my hands, but everything in my heart intact. She came back crying, but by then, I had already healed. And there's nothing more powerful than a man who's made peace with his past and no longer wants to return to it. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how long I stayed. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted so badly to believe in what we had. I held on tighter every time she pulled away. I thought if I just gave more patience, more understanding, more money, somehow she'd find her way back. But here's what they don't tell you. Real love doesn't need to be purchased. It doesn't come with monthly payments. And it damn sure doesn't make you feel like a stranger in your own home. The truth is, I wasn't in a marriage. I was in a transaction. I was handing over my time, my earnings, my attention, and getting crumbs in return. Smiles when it was convenient. A nod when I paid for something. Occasional civility when the bills were covered. I mistook survival for partnership. I confused her dependence on my wallet with commitment to our bond. But what we had wasn't intimacy. It was a contract, one she never signed, but expected me to fulfill anyway. I lived for years in that quiet ache, that sense of not being enough, no matter how much I gave. But now, I wake up alone, and I'm not lonely. There's a difference. Loneliness is when you crave connection and feel its absence. Solitude is when you no longer fear being alone because you've found peace in your own skin. And that's what I have now. Peace. Not perfection. Not a fairy tale ending. Just quiet mornings. Honest days. A mirror that doesn't lie anymore. I still think about her sometimes. Not with bitterness that burned off months ago, but with understanding. She wasn't built for the kind of love I offered. Maybe she didn't even know what to do with it. And I stopped expecting her to. People love how they are taught to love, and some never learn how to give without taking first. That's not my burden to carry anymore. I learned a lot in that house. I learned that begging for affection strips a man of his dignity. I learned that silence can scream louder than any argument. I learned that money can fund a lifestyle, but it can't buy connection. And most of all, I learned that the most expensive thing you'll ever pay for is staying where you're not seen, not valued, not touched, not respected. I spent years investing in someone who only showed up when she wanted something. The affection? Selective. The appreciation? Conditional. But the expectations? Constant. She expected loyalty. She expected comfort. She expected convenience. But the moment I stopped funding the fantasy, the relationship collapsed. Not because I changed, but because I stopped tolerating her pretending. The love I thought I had was never really there. It was built on comfort, on access, on control. And the second she lost control, the narrative fell apart. She cried not because she missed me, but because she lost the ability to use me. I walked away from that woman with nothing in my hands, but everything in my heart finally intact. I had no revenge plan, no public takedown, no social media rant, just boundaries, just distance. And you know what? That was enough, because I no longer needed her to feel what I felt. I didn't need her to acknowledge the damage. I didn't need an apology she'd never mean. I needed peace. And peace, unlike her love, doesn't come with strings attached. These days, I pay my bills for myself. I make my own food, wash my own clothes, clean my own space. And it's quiet, not the silence of resentment, but the stillness of a man who finally chose himself. If there's one thing I'd tell any man listening to this, it's this. Don't stay where you have to earn basic affection. Don't pour yourself out for someone who treats your love like an invoice. You're not weak for wanting closeness. You're not controlling for craving touch. You're not a monster for needing to feel appreciated. You're human. And if the person you're with punishes you for that, it's time to go. You don't owe anyone a lifestyle at the cost of your identity. I gave everything, and she gave nothing. And that's okay now, because it taught me the most important lesson I'll ever learn. The love I used to pay for, it wasn't real. But the peace I found, it cost me absolutely nothing. And in the end, she refused to be intimate. So I refused to keep paying her way. Fair trade. You don't wake up one day and realize your marriage is gone. It doesn't disappear all at once. It fades, quietly, like watching color drain from a photo, slow enough that at first you don't notice. Then suddenly you're looking at a life in black and white, wondering when everything lost its warmth. That's how it started with us. Not with a fight, not with a betrayal, but with absence. I used to walk through the front door after work and hear her voice before I even saw her. Sometimes she'd call from the kitchen, other times she'd be right there in the hallway, barefoot, smiling, asking how my day went. She used to meet me with a kiss, nothing dramatic, just that small act that said, "I see you. I'm glad you're home." But at some point, I can't even say when, that stopped happening. I'd open the door and it would be silent. Not in a peaceful, relaxed way, in a cold, disconnected one. No greeting, no footsteps, just her on the couch, eyes on her phone, earbuds in. Some nights I'd announce myself, "Hey, I'm home," just to say something. She'd wave without looking up, or give me a quick, "Hey, babe," like she was distracted by more important things. It wasn't mean. It wasn't hostile. It was indifferent. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of indifference from someone you love, you know it cuts deeper than any insult ever could. I try not to overthink it. Told myself it was just a phase. Stress. Hormones. A bad week. Everyone says marriage has its ups and downs, right? But the weeks turn into months. And the space between us, once filled with laughter, shared meals, and late-night talks, became an empty hallway we passed each other in without even touching. It was subtle at first. She stopped asking me to join her when she went for errands. Said she could handle it. She started watching shows alone in bed with headphones, even though we used to binge watch together. She'd get up early on Saturdays and disappear into self-care mornings. I used to get coffee ready for both of us. Now I'd drink mine alone in silence while she played soft music behind a closed bathroom door. One night, I reached out to put my hand on her leg while we sat on the couch. Nothing suggestive, just a touch. She shifted slightly, pulled her leg away like it wasn't even on purpose, like her body just naturally didn't want to be near mine. That moment stuck with me. I said nothing, just noted it, like a mental tally. The next week, I started coming home a little later. At first, it was work-related. I stayed back, finishing reports, help a younger colleague who needed advice. But then it became intentional. I'd stop by the gym after hours and lift longer than I needed to. Take the long way home. Sometimes I just sit in my car around the block, engine off, watching couples walk their dogs just to delay stepping into that house. And the crazy part? She didn't even notice. No messages. No calls asking where I was. I came home 2 hours later than usual, one Thursday. She didn't even look up from her phone when I walked in. Just said, "Hey," without looking away from whatever video had her attention. I stood there for a moment longer than I needed to, waiting to see if she'd say anything more. She didn't. I started doing it more, testing the edges, coming in at 8:30 instead of 6, taking work trips I normally passed on, scheduling weekend networking events, and staying out late. Still nothing. And while she noticed none of it, I noticed everything. I noticed how her body leaned away from me in bed, even in her sleep. How she turned down the radio when I talked, but turned it back up when I was quiet. How the texts she used to send during the day, silly jokes, inside references, little I misuse, had vanished, replaced by silence or the occasional grocery request. I noticed how the light in her eyes, the one that used to brighten when I walked into the room, now barely flickered. And I noticed how in all of this, she never once asked me if I was okay. Not even once. And yet, I didn't cause a scene. I didn't demand answers. I just started shutting down in return. Emotionally, I became background noise. I started preparing my own meals, not out of spite, but survival. She rarely asked what I wanted for dinner anymore. So I stopped offering input, stopped asking what she felt like eating, just took care of myself. I stopped reaching for her at night. No more trying to hold her hand, no more kisses on the shoulder, no more good night, babe. Just turned off my lamp and faced the wall. And the wildest part? She seemed relieved, like she'd been waiting for me to take the hint, like my absence made things easier for her. And still, I said nothing, because I wasn't ready to end it. I was trying to see how long someone could go without touching, loving, or even noticing the person beside them before they felt anything. I kept a small notebook in my drawer. I jot things down, small moments. Didn't ask where I was when I came home at 9:10 p.m. She cooked herself dinner, didn't offer any. I made her coffee. She poured it out and made a fresh cup. I asked how her day was. She said fine and walked away. It was like building a quiet record of my own disappearance. Not to use against her, but to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things. I needed evidence that I tried, that I stayed, that I showed up. Because when people ask, why didn't you say something? They never understand that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's the only way to keep your dignity in a place where your voice no longer matters. And the irony? The more I pulled away, the lighter I felt. Not better, not healed, but less drained. I realized I was carrying something alone, something meant for two, and she had already let go. She just hadn't told me yet. But I felt it, every day, in a way she didn't say hello, in a way she didn't say goodnight, in a way she didn't say anything at all. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a rough patch. This was her checking out, and me slowly doing the same. It's strange how a man can be everywhere in a house, in the kitchen, the garage, the bank account, and still feel invisible. That's how it was with us. I handled everything, quietly, consistently, without ever keeping score, at least not at first. The mortgage? I paid it early every month. The electric, gas, trash, and water, all on auto pay, all under my name. Her car insurance was bundled under my policy. Her phone was on my plan. Her subscriptions, streaming services, meal kits, online classes she never finished, all linked to my card. She hadn't touched a utility bill in 3 years. But she had opinions if the Wi-Fi slowed down. I'd come home with groceries, unload them while she was on the couch, put everything in the fridge, restock the pantry. She never asked what I spent, never asked if I needed help. It was just assumed I'd take care of it, and I did. That's what men do, right? We show up. We handle it. We don't complain. And in return, I didn't ask for much. Just appreciation, a little affection, the kind of warmth you expect when you give your best to someone. But with her, it was like handing someone flowers and watching them drop them on the ground and walk away. Every gesture I made was met with less. I remember a night about 6 months before I left. I brought home her favorite takeout. Didn't say anything. Just walked in, set the table, even lit a candle. I played her favorite playlist on low. Just try to spark something. Some kind of reconnection. She came downstairs, looked at the food, and said, "You didn't have to do all this. I already ate." Then she grabbed a sparkling water from the fridge, walked back upstairs, and closed the door. No thanks. No smile. Not even eye contact. I stood there for a moment, in front of that table, staring at the 2 plates, and felt like an employee who had shown up for a job that didn't exist anymore. But I didn't argue. Didn't throw the food away in frustration. I packed it up, put mine in the microwave, and ate alone. That wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. I tried setting up date nights. Even simple things like dinner and a movie. I'd say, let's go out this weekend, just us. She'd answer without looking up from her phone, I'm really not in the mood. Can we just chill? But chilling meant her binge-watching a show alone in the bedroom while I sat in the living room with the dog. I tried surprising her with small gifts, nothing extravagant. A book I thought she'd like. A hoodie from her favorite brand. Even flowers one afternoon, just because. She barely reacted. The book? Left on the table, never touched. The hoodie? Folded and thrown in the laundry basket. The flowers? She looked at them and said, Are these for something? Or, I said, No, just because I saw them and thought of you. She nodded and walked away. That was the moment I realized I was trying to love someone who didn't have room for me anymore. Still, I kept going, because men are taught to fix things, to endure, to wait out the storm. So I kept the lights on, filled the gas tank, made sure her tires were rotated and brakes checked. I reminded her to take her vitamins, asked if she needed anything from the store, showed up when her mom was in the hospital. And while I was doing all of that, she disappeared more every day. She'd walk past me without saying a word. She stopped kissing me goodnight. She started wearing headphones around the house, earbuds and while folding laundry, cooking, scrolling. I was in the room, but she was always somewhere else. And eventually, I started to feel like I wasn't even real. We'd be at a dinner with friends, and she'd smile, laugh, touch my arm in public like everything was great. Then we'd get in the car, and silence would fall again. She'd scroll through her phone at red lights. Not ask me about my day. Not tell me about hers. We had become great actors, playing the roles we thought we were supposed to. But inside, I was empty. I had no resentment. Not yet. Just confusion. Quiet sadness. Because I couldn't understand how someone could accept so much and give back so little. And I know how this sounds. Some people will say, well, maybe she was going through something. And maybe she was. But here's the thing. I asked. I checked in. I said, are we okay? More times than I can count. And each time, she'd say, yeah, I'm just tired, or you're overthinking it. She always had a way of making me feel crazy for wanting what used to be normal. And slowly, I began to believe her. Maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe men aren't supposed to want emotional intimacy. Maybe just providing was my job, and I needed to stop looking for anything else. But late at night, when the house was dark, and she lay facing the wall, and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I knew better. Because I wasn't asking for anything outrageous. I just wanted to be seen, touched, considered. You don't realize how much being unseen eats away at you until the mirror starts showing a version of yourself you don't recognize. I looked tired all the time. I stopped smiling. I didn't joke around like I used to. Friend would ask if everything was okay, and I'd lie with a laugh and say, yeah, just been busy. Busy holding up a home where I was treated like a piece of furniture. She wasn't mean. She just wasn't there. And I think that's what made it harder. Because you can't fight someone who doesn't fight back. You can't fix something when the other person won't even admit it's broken. So I stayed, paid every bill, covered every need, smiled in front of her family, took the car in for maintenance, bought the groceries, replaced the light bulbs, made sure she had what she needed. And every night, I laid down next to a woman who treated me like a stranger. Until one day, I stopped going home altogether. But that's for another part of the story. All I can say is this. When you give and give and give, and someone still looks through you like you're not there, you eventually stop showing up. Not because you want to hurt them, but because you finally accepted the truth. They stopped showing up a long time ago. It happened on a Tuesday, not a date night, not an anniversary, just a regular, uneventful weekday, the kind where routines blur into each other and everything feels like background noise. But I remember every second of that evening. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone, legs crossed, a half-empty mug on the nightstand. The TV was on low, but she wasn't really watching it. She just stared into the screen like she was trying to forget where she was. I stood in the doorway, watching her from a distance. And for a second, I thought about turning around. Not because I didn't love her, but because I was tired of reaching out only to be met with absence. But I didn't turn around. Instead, I walked over and sat next to her, quietly, close enough that our shoulders touched. I didn't say anything, just sat there, trying to feel her presence, try to remember what it was like when that alone brought me comfort. Then I gently placed my hand on her back. Nothing aggressive, just a soft, familiar touch. The kind you give someone when you want to say, "I'm still here." And she flinched. Not sharply, not violently, but just enough to pull away. Like my hand burned. Like my skin was something foreign to her. She didn't say a word. Didn't even look at me. Just scooted slightly forward, adjusted the blanket around her waist, and kept scrolling like I wasn't there. That was the moment I knew. Not suspected. Not feared. Knew. Something in her was gone. Not lost. Not misplaced. Gone on purpose. That tiny movement, that almost imperceptible withdrawal, hit me harder than any argument ever could. Because people don't flinch from strangers unless they feel unsafe. And they don't flinch from their spouses unless they've stopped caring altogether. And that's what it was. Not fear. Not discomfort. Disinterest. And that broke something in me. But not in the way you might think. I didn't cry. I didn't ask, "What was that?" I didn't plead for her to explain. I just sat there, hand back in my lap, staring at the floor. And for the first time, I stopped trying to make it make sense. I stopped trying to justify it, stopped searching for the right time to bring it up, stopped waiting for the spark to reignite. Because you can't beg someone to want you. You can't schedule connection like a dental appointment. You can't offer kindness to a closed door and expect it to swing open one day. She didn't recoil from me because I did something wrong. She recoiled because, to her, I no longer mattered. Not in that way. Not in any way. I sat there for another few minutes, thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd notice how still I'd gone. That she'd reach over, say something, acknowledge the silence that had grown between us. But she didn't. She just kept scrolling. And I just stood up. I walked to the bathroom, closed the door, turned the sink on, and stared into the mirror. I looked older than I remembered. Tired. Not just in the eyes, but in the posture. In the way my shoulders slumped forward. In the way I breathed like I was trying not to take up space. I stared for a long time, and I whispered out loud to no one. She doesn't want me anymore. Not in anger. Not with pain. Just fact. Undeniable. Inarguable. It wasn't the first time she pulled away, but it was the first time I didn't follow. Something inside me went quiet after that. A kind of emotional click, like a door locking gently. I didn't bring it up later. I didn't sulk. I didn't punish her with coldness. I just stopped offering more of myself to someone who no longer wanted to receive it. I slept on the edge of the bed that night. Didn't touch her. Didn't reach out like I normally did. I let the distance stay. Let it grow. And she didn't notice. She slept fine. Peacefully. No tension in her face. No guilt in her breath. Like nothing happened. Like I hadn't just mourned the death of our connection sitting next to her minutes before. The next morning, I woke up early. Showered. Got dressed. And left without saying much. She mumbled a half asleep didn't open her eyes. That was the day I stopped hurrying home. I started walking slower to the car after work, sitting in the parking lot for an extra 15 minutes. I started going to gym again, not for health, but to kill time. Because the longer I stayed out, the more space I gave myself from that hollow feeling. That ghost of a marriage we were pretending to still live in. I stopped suggesting we eat dinner together. Stopped reminding her about that show we used to watch. Stopped texting her during the day unless it was something logistical. And still, she didn't ask why. That was the confirmation I didn't know I needed. Because when someone flinches at your touch and then acts like you don't even exist, there's nothing left to chase. You don't fix that with flowers. You don't fix that with begging. You don't fix that with date nights or therapy brochures or long, heart-spilled texts at 2 a.m. You fix that by walking away, even if your feet are still in the same room. So that's what I did. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just slowly, quietly, day by day. I started leaving pieces of myself behind. The hopeful parts, the soft parts, the parts that used to believe in us. And I became someone else. Not cold, not angry, just numb. And that was the beginning of my exit. Not physical yet, but emotional. That moment, her flinch, that was the start of the unraveling, of me ghosting her before I even walked out the door. Because I realized I've been a stranger in my own marriage for a long, long time. I didn't leave all at once. That kind of clean break only happens in movies when someone slams a door and never looks back. Real life is slower. It unravels in small, almost invisible pieces. At first, I wasn't even aware I was testing her. I thought I was just exhausted, emotionally drained, tired of feeling like a ghost in my own home. But looking back now, I know exactly what I was doing. I needed to know if she still cared. If there was anything left in her that still saw me, really saw me, beneath the routine, beyond the bills, past the roles we'd started performing like clockwork. So I started pulling away, not in anger, not to punish her, but because I had to stop pouring myself into a space that never filled back up. The first thing I changed was my schedule. I used to come straight home after work. No detours, no delays. I'd text her when I was leaving the office, usually with something like, "Need me to grab anything?" or "Be home in 20. She rarely answered those texts. Sometimes she'd just heart them or leave me on read. Occasionally she'd send a dry, "No, I'm good." But never once did she say, "Can't wait to see you," or "Drive safe, I miss you." So I stopped texting and started staying later at work. At first, I told myself it was necessary, catching up on emails, helping the team, reviewing projects. But the truth was, I just didn't want to go home. I didn't want to walk through the front door and feel that tension again, the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace but from detachment. The second week, I added the gym back into my routine. Not because I was trying to get fit or impress anyone, but because it gave me another excuse to avoid that house. I live slow, take long showers afterward, sit in the parking lot with the windows cracked, engine off, letting the cool air hit my face while I listen to nothing in particular. Sometimes I just drive around the block a few times before pulling into the driveway, hoping she'd be asleep or out, anything to avoid another round of forced small talk and mutual disinterest. While I did walk in, she rarely looked up from her phone. "Hey," she'd say, voice flat. "Hey." I'd answer just as emotionless. We went from being partners to being two people who shared a Wi-Fi password. The next part of my test was even simpler. I stopped eating dinner with her. We used to cook together, or at least eat at the same time. But now, I'd grab something on the way home. A burger, a salad, sometimes just a protein bar and water from the gas station. She never asked why. Some nights I'd walk in, and she'd already be in bed with snacks beside her and Netflix on the laptop, halfway through some show we used to watch together. I never got an invite to join, so I didn't offer. Other nights, she'd order food without asking if I wanted anything. I'd find empty bags in the trash and leftovers in the fridge, but nothing ever left for me intentionally. It didn't hurt anymore. It just confirmed what I already suspected. I was no longer part of her day. So I kept the distance growing. I'd sleep facing the opposite side of the bed. I stopped reaching out for her in the dark. No more good nights. No more brushing my hand along her back as I used to. I noticed she didn't move closer, didn't try to reclaim that space. She just adjusted to the gap. That's when I knew she was already gone. You don't ignore the absence of someone you care about. You don't go days without asking, "Are you okay?" unless you've already decided you're no longer responsible for their feelings. And she never asked. Not once. She didn't ask why I was getting home late. Didn't ask why I skipped dinner for 4 days in a row. Didn't ask why I was unusually quiet, or why I went to bed fully clothed and turned away. She just let me fade. And part of me hoped, maybe even begged silently, that she'd reach for me. Just one night. One moment. "Hey, what's going on? I miss you. Are we okay?" But it never came. And that silence, that brutal indifference, told me more than words ever could. It told me that whatever love used to live between us, it had been replaced by comfort, convenience, and habit. And once I fully accepted that, I stopped trying to bridge the gap. Instead, I leaned into it. I started going entire weekends without initiating conversation. If she spoke to me, I answered politely, even kindly. But I never asked anything back. She talked about her day. I nodded. She scrolled TikTok beside me. I stared at the wall. And when I'd step outside for an hour or two, no explanation, no destination, she never followed. Never texted. Just silence. At first, I thought it was a test she was giving me too. Maybe she wanted to see if I'd crack first. If I demand answers. Start a fight. But weeks passed, and her indifference didn't shift. She wasn't testing me. She just didn't care. That's what broke me in a way nothing else could. It wasn't another man. It wasn't betrayal. It wasn't even a big blow-up argument. It was the realization that someone I once shared everything with could now go entire days without even noticing I was emotionally gone. There's a different kind of heartbreak in that. When someone's neglect doesn't come from cruelty, but from pure absence. It's hard to be angry at someone who doesn't even know they've hurt you. So instead of rage, I felt relief. Relief that I finally knew for sure. No more hoping. No more wondering. No more maybe if I try harder. I had tried. I had shown up. I had spoken gently, reached out physically, tried to reconnect emotionally. And she had passed every opportunity like a person sleepwalking past an open door. So I stopped. Stopped expecting anything. Stopped showing up early. Stopped coming home at all on certain nights. And even then, she didn't ask where I was. That was the answer. That was the end. And in its own quiet way, it was a kind of freedom. Because once you know someone doesn't miss you when you're gone, it gets easier to disappear for good. There's something terrifying and clarifying about walking away from your own home and realizing no one even notices. That's exactly what happened. After weeks of slowly pulling back, testing the silence, measuring how far I could emotionally retreat before she said something, I decided to stop waiting for her to notice. I stopped coming home. The first time I did it, I told myself it was harmless. I stayed late at the office, finished up some overdue projects, responded to emails I'd been ignoring. It was nearly midnight when I looked at the clock and realized I didn't want to go home. Not because I was avoiding a fight, but because I knew I wouldn't be missed. So I slept on the small pull-out couch in the office lounge. No blanket, just a hoodie over me and my duffel bag under my feet. When I woke up the next morning, there were no missed calls. No text asking where I'd been. Nothing. She hadn't even noticed. And that silence hit harder than any confrontation ever could. That night should have been an anomaly. A one-time thing. But instead, it became a pattern. I started bringing extra clothes with me in the car. Just in case. I kept a travel kit in the trunk, toothbrush, razor, a change of shirts. I even bought a portable charger and tossed it in my glove box so I could stay unplugged longer. And when I didn't want to sleep at the office, I booked hotels. Nothing fancy, budget chains, off-the-interstate rooms with stiff pillows and flickering fluorescent lights. But they gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Control. I could turn the lights off and fall asleep without tension in the air. I could watch whatever I wanted without earbuds in my own house like I was an intruder in someone else's routine. I could breathe, and that kind of peace, even if it came in the form of scratchy sheets and cheap shampoo, felt like freedom. The craziest part? She never asked where I was. Not once. I'd come home the next morning, sometimes afternoon if it was a weekend, and she'd already be up, hair tied up, coffee made, scrolling through her phone like I had never left. And when I walked in, there was no shock. No, where were you? No curiosity. Just a glance. A brief nod. Like I was a mailman dropping off something she didn't order. It was that moment, that absence of reaction, that made me stop pretending. I was no longer part of her world. I was a fixture, a name on the lease, a bank account that funded her habits, but not a man she loved anymore. So I leaned in. I started leaving town for weekends. Told a friend I hadn't seen in a while what was going on. Not all the details, just enough for him to say, "Yeah, man, crash here anytime." And I did. He had a spare room and a stocked fridge. We watched football, had a couple beers, sat on the porch without having to say much. Just being around someone who actually acknowledged me made me realize how emotionally starved I had been. I stayed for 3 nights. She didn't call once. Not a single missed call. Not even a check-in. When I came back Sunday night, she was watching TV in the living room, legs crossed, blanket over her lap. She looked up for half a second. "You're back," she said. That was it. Not "Where were you?" Not "Are you okay?" Not even "I missed you." I didn't respond. Just nodded, grabbed a water from the fridge, and walked straight to the guest room. I didn't want to be near her that night. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I had given her every opportunity to notice me, to care, to fight for what we used to have. And each time, she did the same thing. Nothing. At that point, I began ghosting her completely, not to hurt her, but to reclaim myself. I stopped sharing my schedule. Stopped letting her know when I'd be late. Stopped including her in any decision that involved my time. Because she had made it clear she didn't want my presence. And I was finally learning not to give myself to places where I wasn't welcome. One night, I came home after midnight. I had taken a long drive through the hills, music on low, windows cracked, just listening to my own breath and the steady rhythm of tires on pavement. When I got home, I realized the porch light was off. She hadn't even left it on. Not because she forgot, but because she hadn't expected me back. That's when it really hit me. She wasn't just indifferent. She had accepted my absence. She had made peace with me not being around, possibly even preferred it. And that knowledge, it didn't break me. It freed me. Because there's something powerful about realizing you no longer have to perform for someone who stopped showing up a long time ago. There's dignity in that silence. Not the silence she gave me, cold, passive, dismissive, but the silence I chose. Intentional, peaceful, honest. I started feeling like myself again during those nights away. I began journaling again, eating better, lifting heavier at the gym. I laughed with coworkers. I spoke slower, slept deeper, all because I was no longer pretending at home, pretending to be loved, pretending to matter, pretending that she still saw me as the man she once chose. The truth? She stopped choosing me a long time ago. I was just the last one to notice. But now I knew, and the only thing left to do was keep walking, quietly, cleanly, and without looking back. It didn't happen overnight. It never does. At first, she didn't notice my absence because she didn't care. But eventually, she did. The shift came quietly, like everything else in our relationship. No grand revelation, no dramatic confrontation. Just one day, she looked around and realized I wasn't coming back. And that's when the calls started. The first one came on a Monday morning. I was already 2 hours into my day, reviewing a shipment schedule at work, sipping burnt office coffee, when my phone buzzed. Brooke, 3 missed calls. I stared at the screen for a second, then set the phone face down. 10 minutes later, another call, then a text. Can we talk? I didn't reply. Not because I was trying to hurt her, but because I didn't owe her that conversation anymore. I had tried to talk for months. Quietly, gently, repeatedly. She just didn't listen. So I listened to her silence. Now, it was her turn to hear mine. The next day, she called again. This time, twice before noon, and once more around 6 p.m. I was at the gym by then, headphones in, finishing my last set of dumbbell presses. I saw her name light up again as I wiped sweat from my face. Still no response. She didn't leave a voicemail. Just more texts. Where are you? Why are you doing this? Just talk to me. She had no idea that I wasn't trying to punish her. I had just moved on, emotionally first and now physically. And you know what's strange? When someone stops responding to you, it doesn't matter how loudly you call their name. They've already left the room. I didn't need to scream. My silence was loud enough now. By Thursday, she started to panic. The messages changed tone. Less why and more please. I miss you. Let's figure this out. You don't even sound like you anymore. That last one stuck with me. Because it was true. I wasn't the same man she used to know. The one who came home with groceries, asked how her day went, scheduled date nights she always canceled, and laid next to her night after night, hoping she'd roll over and remember who I was. That man had stopped existing the moment she flinched at my touch and didn't think it was worth explaining. So no, I didn't sound like him anymore. And she didn't recognize the new version. The one who didn't beg. The one who stopped returning calls. The one who finally realized that being taken for granted is the loneliest place a man can live. And I had left that place behind. By the end of that week, she showed up at my job. She never used to, not even for special occasions. But Friday afternoon, right as I was wrapping up a staff meeting, I saw her outside the glass doors, arms folded, shifting her weight nervously. I stepped out. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Eyes puffy, no makeup, hair pulled into a messy bun like she hadn't planned to come, but decided last minute she couldn't take it anymore. Can we talk? She asked, voice soft. I looked at her, not cruelly, not coldly, just distant. I'm working. I know, she said, eyes pleading. But please, just 5 minutes. I nodded toward the bench outside the building. I'll sit, I said, but I'm not making promises. She followed me out. We sat in silence for a minute. She kept glancing at me, like she couldn't believe I was real. I didn't think you'd really go, she finally said. I said nothing. I thought, I don't know, that you were just upset, that you'd cool off. I kept my gaze on the parking lot. She reached for my arm, and I gently pulled it away. Not aggressively, just firm. She froze. That's what I felt for months, I said calmly. Reaching out and getting nothing. I didn't know you were that unhappy, she whispered. I let out a breath. I was quiet, not invisible. You just stopped looking. Tears started to well in her eyes. And for the first time in a long time, I saw emotion on her face that wasn't annoyance or indifference. It was real, raw, but I didn't move. I know I wasn't present, she said, wiping her cheek. I know I pushed you away, but I didn't think you'd just vanish. I turned to her finally. I vanished in that house a long time ago, I said. You just started noticing once I stopped making noise. She looked down, lips trembling. I miss you. I nodded once. I believe you. Can we fix this? I paused, and the silence that followed wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was the silence of a man who had finally found clarity after drowning in confusion for too long. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not here to make threats. I'm not here to hurt you, but I can't go back to being invisible. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. I needed you to care when it mattered. I continued. Not when you lost your comfort. Not when the house got quiet. Not when you realized your fallback wasn't coming home. Tears fell. She didn't wipe them this time. I'm sorry, she whispered. I nodded. Me too. We sat a moment longer. Then I stood up. I have to get back, I said. She nodded slowly. Will you call me? She asked. I met her eyes. I'll think about it. And I meant it. Because I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was just tired of feeling like a ghost in my own life. She finally remembered I existed. But by the time she did, I had already found myself again. And that man? He wasn't looking for permission to be seen anymore. It was a Sunday afternoon when the confrontation finally happened. I was at the park, sitting under a shaded bench with a paperback I hadn't touched in weeks, trying to clear my mind. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then again. 10 missed calls. All from her. Then a single text. You're a coward. I didn't answer. Just slipped the phone back into my pocket and stared at the people walking past. Families with strollers. A guy walking his dog. A teenage couple sharing a milkshake on a bench across the trail. Normal moments. Uncomplicated. Untangled. That evening, I stopped by the apartment to pick up a few things. I had been living elsewhere, but I still had clothes in the house. Books, tools, things I hadn't fully detached from yet. I didn't expect her to be there, but she was. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I opened the door. Eyes swollen, expression hard, like she'd been building a speech in her head for days. As soon as she saw me, she stood. You don't even have the decency to say goodbye. I closed the door behind me, dropped my keys into my pocket. Hello to you too, I said. Don't, she snapped. Don't play calm right now. You've been ghosting me for weeks. Disappearing, ignoring every message like I'm a stranger. I stood there in silence. Let her talk. Let her release everything. You just vanished. What kind of man does that to his wife? You think this is mature? You think silence fixes anything? I let her breathe. You think walking away without a word makes you better than me? And then I spoke, slowly, calmly. No, I said, I don't think I'm better than you. She crossed her arms. Then explain it, she said, her voice cracking. Explain how the hell you can ghost me. Your wife, like I never meant anything. I walked to the counter, set my phone down gently, then turned and looked her in the eyes. You want the truth? I asked. I deserve it, she said. You're right. You do. I leaned forward, arms braced on the counter. I didn't ghost you, Brooke. She scoffed. Are you serious right now? I nodded. Dead serious. She opened her mouth to interrupt, but I raised my hand, not to silence her, but to hold space for what needed to be said. I was a ghost in this house long before I stopped coming home, I said. I was a shadow sitting beside you on the couch. A name you barely used. A voice you tuned out. A presence you got so used to ignoring that you stopped realizing I had a heartbeat. She blinked, but I didn't stop. You talk about me disappearing like it was sudden. But what about the nights I laid beside you, wide awake, wondering why I felt more alone with you than I ever did by myself? Her arms loosened. What about the dinners I brought home that you said you weren't hungry for? What about the weekends I tried to plan something for us, and you said you were just tired? Her posture shifted, not defensive now, just unsettled. What about the flowers I bought that you never put in a vase? The compliments you shrugged off? The hand I reached out with that you pulled away from? I stepped away from the counter. You think I ghosted you, I said, voice steady. But the truth is, you stopped seeing me long before I walked out that door. Tears formed in her eyes, but I didn't stop. I begged for connection, not with words, but with actions, with consistency, with patience. I gave you everything I had, and you treated it like background noise. She sat back down slowly, eyes locked on me now. And for the first time, she looked small. Not in stature, in certainty. I pulled away, I continued, because I realized I was trying to resurrect something you'd already buried. Silence filled the kitchen. Not angry silence. Not dramatic. Just honest. I thought we were going through a rough patch, she whispered. I nodded. So did I. But I didn't know you were feeling all that. Why didn't you say something? I tilted my head. I did, I said. In every way a man can say it without shouting. I came home. I asked how your day was. I cooked. I cleaned. I waited. You never yelled, she said. Because I didn't want to scare you, I replied. Because I believed love was supposed to be soft. She wiped her eyes. I thought you were just distant. I said. Because you made me feel like I didn't matter. She lowered her gaze. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean to, she said, almost a whisper. I know, I said. That's the part that hurts the most. Another long pause. She looked up again, face full of something I hadn't seen in her in months. Not regret, but awareness. Can we fix this? I didn't answer right away. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to blame. But you can't unghost someone who's been transparent in front of you for so long. I see you now, she said quietly. I nodded once. Good. But I needed you to see me then, when it mattered. Not now, when the house is empty and the silence is yours to hold. Her shoulders slumped. I gathered a few of my things from the hallway closet. Nothing much. A jacket, a box of tools, a pair of boots. When I turned to leave, she didn't stop me. But just as I opened the door, she asked, Will I see you again? I paused. Maybe, I said. Will you answer if I call next time? I don't know, I replied. It depends if you're calling to talk to me or the version of me you remember. She looked down, and I walked out, not in anger, not in victory, but with peace, because for the first time in a long time, I had spoken my truth, and she heard it, and that was enough. She showed up at my door a week later. I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. By then, I'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd stopped wondering when she'd realize what she lost. Stopped caring whether or not her regret would ever catch up to my silence. But there she was, standing outside the apartment I'd rented after I walked out. Hair pulled back, jacket zipped to her neck, eyes red like she hadn't slept properly in days. Her hands trembled when I opened the door. I stepped aside. She walked in. I didn't hug her. She didn't try. We sat at the kitchen table, the one I'd bought used from a local resale shop. It wasn't the table we used to eat at, the one in our shared house, the one that had gone untouched for months while we silently passed each other in the kitchen like strangers. She glanced around like she didn't recognize this version of my life. Probably because she didn't. I miss you, she whispered. I nodded. I know. I've been thinking about everything. About us. About what I did. What I didn't do. Her voice cracked, and for a second, I saw the version of her I fell in love with years ago. The one who used to laugh with her whole body. The one who used to text me good morning. Who kissed me just because, who used to look at me like I mattered. But that version of her had been gone for a long time, and I had grieved her already. I should have tried harder, she continued. I should have listened. You were there, and I didn't see it. I didn't see you. I stayed silent. Not because I had nothing to say, but because there was nothing left to fix. She reached across the table, her hand open, palm up. I want to start over. The sentence landed in the air like a fragile piece of glass. I looked at her hand, then at her face, and I felt calm, not angry, not vengeful, just sure. I believe you mean that, I said softly. She nodded, tears in her eyes. But I can't, I continued. I can go back to a place that made me feel like I was nothing. She blinked, lips parting. I wasn't trying to make you feel that way. I know, I said. That's what makes it harder. Her face crumbled slightly. Do you remember the last time you told me you loved me without me saying it first? She looked down. Do you remember the last time you asked how I was doing? No answer. The last time you touched me without it being out of guilt. Her shoulders curled inward. I used to count, I said. Every night, I came home hoping maybe you'd say something, anything, that would remind me I was still someone to you. Her tears were falling freely now, but I didn't stop. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was trying to let her see the wound she left behind. But you didn't say anything. For months. And I kept showing up, paying for everything, doing everything. And you didn't even look at me. I was lost, she whispered. I was tired. I didn't know how to come back. I understand, I said. I do. But I can't be the only one who kept trying while you checked out. She reached for me again, but I didn't move. I want to fix it, she said. I'll go to therapy. I'll do the work. I'll listen. Please. I looked at her hand. The same hand that pulled away from mine a dozen times. The same hand that had waved me off when I tried to hold it on the couch. The same hand that hadn't touched my face, my chest, my back, in what felt like years. You want to rebuild something, I said, but the foundation is gone. Her lip trembled. People come back from worse. They do, I said, but I already did the work of letting go. I had to, because staying was killing me slowly. Her voice was barely audible now. I didn't know. I did, I said. I knew every day, and I stayed anyway, hoping, wishing you'd come back. But you never did. Not until I left. She broke then, not with screams or rage, just a quiet, shattered sob that filled the tiny kitchen like a whisper you can't unhear. I didn't rush to comfort her, because I had already done that for too long, try to hold together something she didn't want to carry with me. Now, it was her weight to bear. I don't hate you, I said gently, and I'm not trying to punish you, but I found something I can't trade again. She wiped her face. What? Peace, I said. I found peace. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, then closed. I used to think I needed you to feel whole, I continued. But then I left and realized I had been whole all along, just buried under loneliness, rejection, and silence. She stood slowly. Her eyes searched my face like she was hoping for a crack in the armor. But I was no longer pretending to be okay for her sake. Now I was okay for mine. I understand, she whispered, voice shaking. I don't like it, but I understand. I walked her to the door. She paused before stepping out. If you change your mind, I won't, I said softly. But thank you for saying what you needed to say. She nodded once, then walked away. And when the door clicked shut behind her, I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I exhaled, deeply, because for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel empty. I felt free. If you've made it this far, I want to be clear about something. I didn't leave her for someone else. There wasn't another woman waiting on the side. No affair. No secret messages. No hidden feelings for someone new. I left because I had to. I left because staying was destroying me quietly, and I realized no one was going to come save me from it. So I saved myself. And maybe that doesn't sound dramatic enough for some people. Maybe you expected some wild story of revenge, or cheating, or a new flame pulling me out of the fire. But that's not this story. This one's about a man who gave everything he had to a relationship and was met with silence. Repeatedly. This is about a man who showed up every day, physically, financially, emotionally, and slowly realized he wasn't being seen anymore. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual. It was subtle. First, she stopped greeting me when I walked in the door. Then she stopped asking how my day was. Then came the excuses that I'm tired, though I've just got a lot on my mind, that can we not do this right now? And I accepted every one of those answers. I excused them. I justified them. Because that's what men are taught to do when they love someone. We adapt. We fix. We hold it down until things get better. But here's the thing no one tells you. We're the only one holding the weight. You eventually collapse. You can't carry a relationship alone. You can't build something real with someone who's emotionally absent, who's indifferent, who stopped fighting for you and expects you to do the same for them every time. I left because I couldn't survive that anymore. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I had finally started remembering what it felt like to love myself. That's not selfish. That's survival. Let me tell you something that most men won't say out loud. It hurts to feel invisible. It hurts to reach for your partner and feel their body pull away. It hurts to be the one paying the bills, keeping the lights on, making sure everything runs smoothly, and still feel like you're just a guest in your own home. It hurts to sleep beside someone who doesn't touch you anymore, doesn't kiss you, doesn't ask how you're holding up, doesn't laugh at your jokes, doesn't argue, because that would require caring. So I stopped explaining my pain and started respecting it. Because explaining your pain to someone who refuses to hear it is a form of emotional bleeding. You keep opening the wound, hoping they'll notice, hoping they'll help you close it, but they just walk past it again and again, like it's not their problem. I left because I got tired of bleeding in front of someone who refused to hand me a bandage. And no, I didn't leave to teach her a lesson. I didn't ghost her to play games. I didn't want her to hurt. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wanted peace. I wanted quiet that wasn't filled with rejection. I wanted to hear my own thoughts without having to translate them into justifications for why I was being neglected. I wanted to stop living on autopilot, showing up out of obligation instead of joy, surviving instead of living. I wanted to wake up in the morning and not feel like a burden in my own bed. If you're a man listening to this right now, I want you to understand something clearly. You're not weak for wanting affection. You're not needy for missing connection. You're not dramatic for asking to be seen, to be loved, to be acknowledged. You're human. And if you're giving your best to someone who makes you feel like you're asking for too much, that's not love. That's emotional erosion. I didn't realize how much I had lost myself in that house until I stepped away. The silence that followed when I finally walked out wasn't empty. It was full of everything I'd been missing: clarity, dignity, peace. You know how I knew I made the right decision? I slept better the first night I left than I had in months. Not because I was celebrating being alone, but because for the first time, I wasn't negotiating with myself for scraps of affection. I wasn't begging with my silence anymore. I was reclaiming it. And yes, eventually someone else came along. Someone who sees me, listens when I speak, and doesn't treat intimacy like a transaction. But I didn't leave to find her. I found her after I found me. That's the truth. And that's what I want men to understand. Your healing doesn't come from replacing someone. It comes from remembering who you are when you stop bending just to stay loved. When you stop apologizing for having needs. When you stop shrinking just to keep the peace. Leaving wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. There were nights I stared at the ceiling wondering if I'd made a mistake. If I'd given up too soon. If I'd misread everything. But every time I remembered the way she used to look through me, I knew I didn't leave for someone else. I left for the version of me who had been buried under silence for far too long. And if you've been there, if you know what it feels like to disappear inside your own marriage, you don't owe anyone guilt for saving yourself. You owe yourself honesty. And my honest truth is this: I didn't walk away to hurt her. I walked away because I had finally stopped hurting myself. It's funny how loud silence can get when it's finally yours to hold. She never heard mine when I was begging for her attention with my presence. But when I left, when I stopped filling the space she had gotten used to walking through without noticing, that silence suddenly roared. That's what people don't understand about distance. It doesn't always begin with a slammed door or a final fight. Sometimes it begins with a man walking into his own house and not being greeted. Sometimes it begins with reaching for a woman who pulls away. Sometimes it starts the moment you realize your voice only gets heard when you say something useful, and your pain doesn't qualify. She didn't hear the silence while I was still home, because she never listened to anything that didn't serve her comfort. But when I left, that's when the volume turned up. Not because I got louder, but because I stopped speaking entirely. And she finally realized I had been holding the emotional sound of that relationship the whole time. The moment I let go, everything went quiet. And that's when she noticed. She noticed the missing routine, the space in the bed that stayed cold, the sink that didn't fill itself with clean dishes, the phone that didn't light up at 6 p.m. with a "need anything on the way home?" She noticed the way her own voice echoed in the house when she came back from work, and there was no one waiting to ask her about her day. She noticed she was alone, and not by accident, by choice. My choice. But here's what I want anyone listening to this to really understand. This wasn't punishment. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't about making her feel what I felt. It was about ending the lie that I still felt anything at all. You don't leave because you hate someone. You leave because you love yourself enough to stop dying where you're not valued. You stop showing up to be ignored. You stop trying to prove your worth to someone who closed their eyes while you gave them your best. And yes, it hurts. Even when it's the right thing to do. Even when you know there's nothing left. Even when they treated you like a ghost. Because you didn't want it to end. You just wanted it to feel alive again. But when someone gets used to your presence without ever reciprocating, eventually, you become a convenience, not a connection. And convenience never gets mourned until it's gone. So no, I didn't make a scene. I didn't pack my bags while yelling. I didn't burn bridges or throw accusations. I disappeared the same way I had learned to live in that house. Quietly, respectfully, and completely. And when she finally noticed, it wasn't because she missed me. It was because she missed the way I made her life easier. She missed the security, the silence I used to fill with effort, the emotional labor I carried alone. But it was too late. Because here's something no one tells you. By the time a man stops talking, by the time he chooses distance over discussion, by the time he starts sleeping in peace instead of beside you, he's already gone. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, long before his body ever leaves the room. And once that version of him dies, he doesn't come back. Not for closure, not for apologies, not even for love. Because when you've lived like a ghost for that long, feeling invisible, unwanted, overlooked, and you finally remember what it means to be whole again, you don't trade that peace for someone's panic. You don't trade your clarity for someone else's confusion. And you don't go back just because they finally noticed you were gone. No matter how many tears they cry, no matter how loud the regret. Because it wasn't the silence that broke the relationship. It was their inability to hear what it was saying the entire time. So if you're listening to this and you're still in that house, still in that relationship, still showing up for someone who doesn't see you, let me say something to you directly. Don't stay where you're tolerated. Don't fight to be noticed by someone who only misses you when their comfort is gone. Don't waste your soul trying to rebuild something they let rot while you held it together alone. You deserve to be chosen every day, not just the day you walk out the door. And if you've already left, but you're doubting it, wondering if you made the right call, replaying memories and soft moments and whispered promises, just remember what made you go quiet in the first place. Remember the way you begged with your eyes. Remember the ache of rejection, the numbness of indifference, the cold shoulder that turned your heart into a stranger. And then remember what it felt like the first time you slept in your own space with your peace intact. That peace, that belongs to you now. You earned it. You bled for it. You should never give it up again. I'm not telling you this as someone who figured it all out. I'm telling you this as someone who broke quietly, rebuilt slowly, and now lives freely. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I started loving myself more than her comfort. And in the end, she stopped giving attention. So I stopped coming home. And when she finally looked for me, I was already gone.